The UN plans a donor conference to help people in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but Congolese officials are refusing to go, accusing the agency of overreacting. How bad are things on the ground? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zeidan. A humanitarian disaster of extraordinary proportions. That's how the UN described what's happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo last month. The country has been at war for much of the past 25 years, including recent political instability after President Joseph Kabila stayed in power beyond his mandated two-term in office. Now, as the UN plans to hold a donor conference in Switzerland, Congolese officials say they will not attend, accusing the agency of exaggerating the problem. We've got a lot to talk about with our guests, but first, this report from Charlotte Bellis.
She tried to run, but Marie Lotchow fell, trying to escape her attackers.
One of the Lendu militia cut me with a machete. My brother helped me run away, but I was also hit by 2 arrows on my side. 4 of my kids were killed that same day.
Lotchow and her family are among the tens of thousands of Congolese who have been injured and displaced during 4 months of clashes. The violence has simmered for decades, fueled by disputes over land sharing between Haima herders and Lendu farmers in Ituri province. Villagers have streamed into domestic displacement camps and over the border into Uganda.
We've been living in a very difficult situation. We don't know what the president thinks about resolving this situation, so we can go back home.
President Joseph Kabila promised to visit the displaced this week, but he has battles of his own. Many Congolese are furious with him for clinging to power after his term expired 2 years ago and for refusing to call elections. Critics argue he's doing little to prevent the ethnic violence.
We had problems between the two communities even before 2003. We controlled it because the government was absent. Today, all the legal and security forces are present. How can we justify then these level of atrocities? This is why we're saying it was done willingly by the authorities.
A leader with one of the tribes says both sides are being manipulated.
We have former militia members without jobs in our community, and it's easy to manipulate them. The enemy of our province is profiting from the unemployed young boys in order to destabilize the Ituri province.
The UN is warning of a worsening situation. 13 million people need humanitarian assistance. 4.6 million children are acutely malnourished, and there's an epidemic of cholera and sexual violence. Ethnic troubles in Ituri province, just one crisis within many for a country racked by conflict. Charlotte Bellis for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guest then in the Congolese capital Kinshasa. Joining us on the line, Claude Mashala, National Executive Secretary of the ruling party, the PPRD. In Geneva, Babar Baloch, spokesman for the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. And in London, Vava Tampa, founder of Save the Congo, a London-based campaign for human rights in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Thanks for joining us. If I'd actually start with Claude. So here's a statement I got from the UN Security Council. They're talking about 13.1 million people in need of aid, 7.7 severely food insecure. Are the numbers wrong, sir?
If I can say something directly, it seems like that there is a kind of dangerous mixture, what you are doing expressly. As you start talking about Kabila keeping power, refusing to step down and so on, then you after that to talk about that humanitarian crisis in the DRC. I think that there is a kind of
just to clarify, sir, we didn't actually use the words refusing to step down. We did explain a bit of the background of the history of what's been going on in the DRC, stating that the president has stayed in power beyond the 2 terms in office, which is factual.
Yeah, that humanitarian crisis has nothing to do with elections, nothing with politics. You know, if you go back in our history, you can see that the two communities use to fight. There is a land problem. There is so many other problems which are nothing to do of politics, you know. And if today the UN decide to, or the international community decide to help, but they are willing to help us in a context which we are not sure that the objective is to help our people. I think that they are just willing to see that, to show that Kabila and his government is not doing enough to help his people. And so you see that it's a kind of a plot against our leader, our country, and we think that once Kabila will go up there, then you'll see a solution start coming about that crisis.
Of course, absolutely. And just to point out, perhaps you missed it, sir, but we did mention as well in the intro that the country has been at war for much of the past 25 years. So that's obviously a problem that predates the arrival of Joseph Kabila to power. So there was no insinuation on our part that the whole problems of the DRC lie solely on the question of whether or not Joseph Kabila stays in power. Let me take the question, though, to our guests, because or some of our other guests, I feel you haven't really addressed that. And if I can take it to the perhaps to Babar in Geneva, the criticism that we've heard coming from officials is that the UN is really exaggerating the situation in the DRC by announcing the sort of level 3 state of emergency. Has there been some exaggeration there?
We have seen worrying levels of displacement as well, and it's quite complex inside the DRC. We work hand in hand with the government in terms of helping around 500,000 refugees that are currently inside the DRC. Let's not forget, we are talking about 4.5 million internally displaced who are from the DRC, displaced inside DRC. And then we have refugees, as the report was mentioning, who have been arriving in the neighboring countries. Over 700,000 DRC refugees, Congolese refugees, are in the neighboring countries.
Right, but I think the point that Claude was making a moment ago, Babar, if you give me, sorry, forgive me for jumping in, is that perhaps the picture can emerge from statements like that the government is unable to deal with the crisis, and Claude would argue that is inaccurate.
Our worry is actually the displacement scenario inside DRC, and those who are forced to flee, like areas in Ituri that we were just seeing the images as well, is risk being forgotten. I mean, we don't have enough resources as humanitarians. I mean, we are keeping politics aside over here. We are talking about the impact of everything what is happening on civilians, which is affecting millions. We think that donors and others are forgetting what the humanitarian needs are currently, but saying that government is one of our most important partner on the ground.
All right, let me briefly give an opportunity for Claude to address that before we'll go on to Babar in London. I know you're eager to get in, Babar, but just briefly, Claude, will you accept that sort of characterization that perhaps the utmost concern should be now of the government should be that people shouldn't be forgotten. People in need should not be forgotten by the international community. Why is your government more worried about its image being hurt?
You know, it's not the first time those international media used to play this kind of game. And remember that before President Mobutu, before the country being invaded by the rebels and so on in that time, they start of showing on the media, on the TVs, the same thing, you know. And all the international community start talking about helping us. Remember what happened. It's just 3 or 4 years ago, Mr. Ban Ki-moon say the same thing about the Eastern crisis in the DRC, and nothing happened. Nothing happened. But why? 8 months before the election, they start talking about the humanitarian crisis. Nobody said that we have to forget all those people.
Are you suggesting, Claude, that perhaps there is a deliberate attempt on the part of aid agencies, maybe even on the UN, to disrupt elections by making these sorts of announcements of level 3 emergencies?
Yeah, that is the objective. That is the point. I think that this is not the way of helping the DRC to be able to organize those elections. They're just willing to disturb everything so they can justify what they are willing to do against our leaders, against our country. It's one of the strategy.
Okay,
that is the point.
Allow me to take that point.
But they supposed first to talk to our government and to see in the actual context how this help will reach those people in need. But if you can analyze the way this is done in the international media, it's just about a plot against our country.
Okay, let's take that point to Babar in London. Do you see that what aid agencies, what the UN is doing is part of a plot to undermine the government at a sensitive political time like elections?
It's extraordinary to hear what Mr. Mashala has put forward. I mean, here we are speaking about 13.1 million Congolese in need of support, in need of assistance, and yet all that he has been doing is defending his belly, defending his pocket, and protecting Kabila. And he's doing so because of one reason. He's doing so because he understands that they have been practicing a politics of corruption, and he understands that this conference on the humanitarian crisis in Congo is going to hold Kabila and his regime accountable for the killings, for the displacement, for violence. We've spoken about Ituri. Another sign or another scene of crisis is actually Kasai, where again, millions of people are in need of humanitarian support. And we know precisely, in places such as Kasai, we know that the government has instigated the violence. We have seen massacre happening. It has claimed thousands of lives. It has claimed 2 UN experts. I mean, these are crises which the government has created. And he needs to remember, Ms. Claude must remember that the election has not been organized by the government in Kinshasa, by Mr. Kabila. He had an opportunity to organize election from between 2011 to 2016. He did not. He was given 1 year to organize election again, which was last year. He did not. And now he's been given another year by Nikki Haley, which ends this December. And clearly they are struggling because they do not have any intention of organizing election. And all of a sudden they are refusing to meet with the very same people who had kept them in power, who had given them money, who had sustained them in power. It should speak thousands of words.
Perhaps if we go back to Claude, once again, I'd like to try to get you to clarify, sir, what exactly is it that you think the UN is releasing that is inaccurate about your country? Is it the figures when it says 13.1 million is in need of aid and 7.7 severely food insecure? Is it the categorization of being in a state of level 3 emergency? What exactly do you think is inaccurate and unhelpful to your country's image that the UN is doing?
The first thing that is there to avoid those kind of people who are talking about corruption, about criminality in the DRC, and they are avoiding to talk the same about those other countries around the DRC or even in Europe or in America, or which are doing ever more than what is happening in my country. You see, I just listened to that guy talking about Mr. Mashala, the supporting Kabila, corruption, and so on. I can just tell him that he doesn't know anything about the DRC.
Okay, but okay, he doesn't.
What the UN is willing to do actually. Is,
but if I could try one last time, sir. Has the UN got its numbers wrong?
The international.
Has the UN got its facts wrong?
But the people in need are a lot. There are plenty. but why right now? I think that we need our people to being helped, but why right now?
Okay, let's take that point. Let's, if you allow us, Mr. Claude.
He was talking about the fact that Mr. Kabila are not willing to organize the election since 2011 to now. But
okay, let's take that question to Babar in Geneva if we can.
To do the election,
Babar,
they must let us organize before.
All right, I'll give you a chance, Claude, to come back in on some of those points, but if you may, let us go to Babar in Geneva. Why then is the UN raising this now, as Claude, I think, feels that this is an issue that has been going on, people in need. Why now?
For us, it's very important that the focus goes back to the people who are suffering. We as humanitarians are receiving thousands who are fleeing the violence and the horrible accounts they're giving us in Uganda, fleeing from Ituri and North Kivu as well. Let's not forget, each year we as humanitarians have to present a plan for the year in terms of how many people we are supposed to assist and help in terms of humanitarian needs. We just yesterday, as UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, launched another appeal of around $500 million or $500 million for around 800,000 Congolese refugees which will be in the region. So it's very important that we don't lose sight of who is suffering. Peace and stability is very important.
Allow me to present to you, Babar, in Geneva, allow me to present to you an alternative opinion. One could say and could argue that this is not the first time the UN has been accused of exaggerating a crisis. We'll remember, of course, that the Nigerian president accused the UN of hype back in December 2016. He said the UN was practicing hype to draw donor support. In June 2010, we had the Council of Europe accusing the UN's WHO of exaggerating the threat of H1N1 virus. Has the UN sometimes got it wrong?
What we are seeing in terms of refugees arriving in the neighboring countries, people being displaced on the ground, enormous suffering. And as I was talking about people who are arriving in Uganda right now from Ituri and the North Kivu province, our estimate for this year for refugees arriving in Uganda from the DRC was 60,000. We have crossed that estimate just in the first 3 months, and still thousands continue to arrive on the shores of Lake Albert. And majority of them are women and children who have lost everything. And with the accounts that they're coming with, you can't doubt that there is a humanitarian crisis.
Babar, allow me to jump in, and forgive me for interrupting you, and let me take that point briefly back to Claude before we go to Babar in London. So Claude, the answer to your question, I think, is that, as Babar has explained to us here, that the number of refugees that they've seen crossing over into Uganda and places like that, the number of displaced people, those sorts of movements have picked up recently. That's why they've put out this urgent appeal and attempt to put out a donors conference. Does that not make sense to your mind?
No, it makes sense if the number which he's talking about is not exaggerated. But actually what we know that all those UN agencies in and around the DRC, they're just doing business, you know. They're making a lot of money. I think that last month, we show to the media locally here some 4x4 belonging to those agencies who have been involved in the traffic of minerals and so on, even the harm deal and so on. That is why you are saying that they need first to talk to our government before that publicity about what is going on in DRC. It's true people are crossing the border to Uganda and so on, but we think that there is they are just exaggerating for their own business, not for helping people. They're not helping people, they're just making money, those guys.
They are not helping people, so they're just making money. I can see, Babar in London, you've been shaking your head for a while. Let me give you a chance to come in on that one.
Well, again, simply extraordinary to hear Congolese men in Kinshasa essentially dismissing what are valid estimates, what are valid reports in attempt to support and sustain the lives of the Congolese people. And we ought to ask ourselves a serious question, which is, why is Mr. Mashala continuing to dismiss the plight of the Congolese people? Why is he refusing that 13.1 million Congolese are in need of support? Perhaps he should give us a number which his regime, the regime of Mr. Kabila in Kinshasa, have estimated how many of them perhaps they are. I mean, again, as I said before,
let me pose that question. Hang on, Babar. Let me pose that question and then we'll come back to you. So how many people do you recognize are in need of aid, and what level of emergency would you put on that, sir?
I think that the better first talk to the government before giving to the international opinion that kind of numbers.
Well, does the government have a number, sir? I mean, you're the...
I think so.
Okay, well, you're the National Executive Secretary of the ruling party. Could you tell us what that number is?
I am not in the government.
Right, but you are in the ruling party. Are you not familiar with the number of a huge crisis that afflicts your country right now?
Involved in that kind of managing refugees and so on, 24 hours. No, I think that those guys, they supposed first to talk to our government. They never done that.
Okay.
They started talking about the need in DRC is about millions, about billions, wishing that is for their pocket, not for those people supposed to be in need.
All right, let me come back to Babar.
That is my point of view.
I promised I'd give you, Babar in London, a chance to continue your thought. Go ahead.
I think what your viewers would understand from this essentially is that Mr. Mashala is speaking from a la-la land. He simply doesn't have a clue and simply isn't in touch with the actual crisis that the Congolese people are facing on the ground. And that speaks volumes in terms of his politics, in terms of his priority, in terms of what Mr. Kabila's regime are essentially attempting to do on the ground. And again,
but,
I mean,
Babar,
this is
allow me to present to you as well, perhaps the counter opinion to that, the attempts by the opposition to enforce sort of ghost town shutdown in Kinshasa and so on didn't materialize. I'm sure supporters of the government would say that it's the opposition to the government that is trying to spin this politically and is not really in touch with the will of the people, as the failed shutdown displays.
John, I'll tell you what, the Congolese people are under occupation. And when you're living under occupation, as other countries have across the world, the situation, your living conditions are incredibly difficult. We have managed to do what we have done under difficult situations. The reason Mr. Kabila has been unable to change the constitution, the reason his regime has been unable to cling to power, although they are attempting, is because the Congolese people has paid with their lives and they have endangered their lives, and they continue to do so every single day. But now, let me bring us back to this humanitarian crisis, because this is incredibly serious. We know in Kasai, for instance, that 400,000 children are at risk of dying from starvation if they do not receive humanitarian support and humanitarian assistance.
Right.
Now, you have a government that has been in power since 2001, and yet that government, that regime remained unable to do anything substantial in support of the Congolese people across the country, 13.1 million. And all of that, this situation has been exacerbated by the very fact that we have a political crisis.
Mr.
Kabila refusing to stand.
I think that's one thing we can all agree on. I'm afraid we are out of time, so let's thank our guests very much, Claude, Babar and Babar. And thank you too for watching. You can see the show again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, head over to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle there is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Sami, Zeidan, and the entire team here, it's goodbye for now.